The hostess at the inn checked her tablet twice, then a third time, before she worked up the nerve to tell me there was no chair with my name on it. I had driven 9 hours that day, down from the Blue Ridge to the Low Country, with my late mother's garnet brooch wrapped in a handkerchief in my purse and a back that hadn't forgiven me since Tennessee. I am 68 years old. I don't make a trip like that for fun anymore. I made it because my son had called me 3 weeks earlier and said, in that warm voice he uses when he wants something or feels guilty about something, "Mom, it wouldn't be right without you. You're still family." And I had let that sentence carry me 400 miles, the way a woman my age lets a lot of things carry her, because the alternative is admitting how little weight is left in the words. There had been no real invitation. No card, no email, no itinerary. Just that phone call, and then silence, and then a text from my daughter-in-law 2 days before, when I asked what time to arrive. A little thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. I told myself she was busy. I told myself a great many things on that drive. The party was her 40th birthday, thrown in her own honor at a restored carriage house inn just off the Battery in Charleston. The kind of place with oyster shell walls and a courtyard strung with bistro lights and a wine list longer than the Bible. This was the small Friday night family dinner, the warm-up to the big catered gala she'd planned for Saturday, the one with 200 guests and a step and repeat banner and sponsors, because somewhere along the way my daughter-in-law had turned her own birthday into a brand activation. I'd worn the navy I saved for funerals and weddings. The one Edmund always said made me look like I knew a secret. I came through the iron gate into that courtyard expecting, I think, to be folded back in, to be the grandmother in the corner who holds the coats and remembers everyone's allergies. I would have taken that. God help me. I would have taken even that. They were already seated. My son, my daughter-in-law in white, of course, on her own birthday, like a bride who keeps marrying herself. Her mother and father down from Connecticut. Her 2 sisters, a college friend of hers I had once hosted for an entire Thanksgiving when she had nowhere to go. 11 of them, around a long table under the magnolias, candlelight catching the rims of the glasses. I counted the chairs the way you count stairs in the dark. 11 people. 11 chairs. I'm with the family party, I told the hostess. I'm the mother of the groom, the son, Marsh. There should be a place for me. She scanned and scanned again, and gave me the look they teach you not to give in hospitality school, the one that means I am so sorry and I don't get paid enough for this in the same breath. Ma'am, I have a reservation for 11. I don't have your name. My son looked up then. He didn't startle. That's the part I keep coming back to. He didn't leap up, didn't go pale, didn't knock over a glass scrambling to fix it. He gave me a soft, tired smile, the smile of a man who has already decided that whatever happens next is not really his problem. Mom, you made it. My daughter-in-law didn't even set down her wine. She fluttered her fingers at me from across the candles and said, light as anything, "Oh, looks like we miscounted. Whoops." And she laughed, a small bright laugh, and it gave the rest of them permission, and I heard it move down the table like wind through a screen door. Not a roar, worse than a roar, a ripple. A few of them caught themselves, a few didn't bother. A young waiter started toward the corner to fetch a folding chair, and I lifted my hand and stopped him, because I will tell you something about being a woman who spent her whole life setting tables. I know the difference between a seat and an afterthought, and I was not going to sit in the afterthought. No need, I said. I won't stay. I took the garnet brooch out of my purse, the one I had driven 9 hours to pin on her, the one my mother wore to every Easter and every anniversary until the day she died, and I set it on the corner of the table beside the untouched bread, still folded in its handkerchief. I told my daughter-in-law, happy birthday. I meant it the way you mean it when you've finally seen someone clearly. Then I turned around and walked back out through that iron gate, my heels loud on the cobblestones, and I did not look back, even when I heard the glasses come together behind me in some toast that had nothing to do with me. I made it to the end of the block before I had to stop and hold on to a wrought iron rail. Not crying. I want to be clear that I wasn't crying. I was doing something else, something I didn't have a name for yet, something closer to waking up. And standing there in the dark with the Spanish moss hanging like old lace over the street lamp, I took out my phone, and I scrolled to a number I have had in my contacts for 31 years, and I pressed it, and when she answered, I said only 3 words. It's me. Ready? Let me back up and tell you who I am, because they had forgotten, and that was their first mistake. For 31 years, I ran the catering company that did every wedding, every anniversary, every retirement and reception worth remembering between Charleston and Savannah. I built it from a borrowed church kitchen and a 1983 station wagon. I plated the governor's inauguration dinner. I did a senator's daughter's wedding for 400 and not one fork was out of place. I trained 2 generations of cooks and planners and floral designers and sommeliers, and when I sold the business 8 years ago, I sold the name, but I kept the people. They still call me Mrs. Marsh. They still pick up on the first ring. My son knew that. Of course he knew that. He had grown up folding napkins in the back of my van. And when he and my daughter-in-law decided to throw the birthday gala of the century, do you think they paid full freight for the best caterer in the Lowcountry, the best florist, the string trio everyone fights over? They did not. They got the dates, the supposedly booked solid. They got the family discount. They got the preferred vendor rate at a venue that turns away 3 couples a week. And they got all of it the only way anyone gets all of it on 3 weeks' notice in wedding season. They used my name. I found this out the way you find out most things that matter. Slowly, sitting alone in a hotel room with my shoes off and the air conditioner ticking. Because I did not drive back to the mountains that night. I checked into a quiet place off Meeting Street, and I took the leather portfolio I still travel with out of my bag, the one full of laminated old menus and seating charts and contracts, not because I needed them, but because holding them reminds me who I used to be when I stopped feeling like who I am. And on a whim, an old reflex, I pulled up the catering company's vendor portal on my phone and typed in the login I'd had since before my son could drive. I expected it to be dead. 8 years is a long time. The system thought about it for a second, and then it let me in, smooth as butter, like no time had passed at all. There it was, Saturday's Gala. 200 covers, a 3-tier cake, a raw bar, and under the field marked Responsible Party of Record, where the contract names the person with final authority to confirm, modify, or cancel, was a name I knew better than my own. Mine. They hadn't put her name on it or my son's. They'd put mine. Because the woman who runs that catering company now was my sous chef for 9 years, and she would do anything for me. And when my son came calling, she'd done him the favor of letting the family principal stand as the authorizing contact, the way you do for people you trust. They had reached into my life, taken the one thing I had built that still meant something, used it like a coupon, and then set me at a table with no chair. I sat there a long time with the phone glowing in my hand. I want to tell you I wrestled with it. The truth is I didn't, not really. 31 years of biting my tongue had built up a pressure I didn't know I was carrying until the valve finally turned. I thought about all the quiet years, the way my daughter-in-law had called me homespun at their rehearsal dinner, smiling like it was a compliment, and seated me behind a flower arrangement, so tall I watched my own son get married through a gap in the hydrangeas, the way she called only when they needed something, the down payment they swore they'd pay back, the loan for her sister's gallery opening, the investment my son begged for when his restaurant idea was going to change everything and then closed in 11 months, and he never spoke of the $40,000 again. I had pulled it from the money Edmund left me, the money that was supposed to be for me. I let it go. I always let it go. That was the whole arrangement, and they had grown so comfortable in it they'd stopped noticing I was a person at all. But you do not get to use a woman's name and forget she's still attached to it. I called my old sous chef. She runs the company now. At 11:15 that night, and she answered like she'd been waiting 31 years for me to ask her for something instead of the other way around. I didn't dress it up. I told her my name was still listed as the responsible party on the Saturday booking and that I was exercising that authority, and that I wanted the catering canceled, the florist, the trio, all of it, effective immediately, in writing, under my signature. There was a pause on the line. Then she said real quiet, "Mrs. Marsh, can I ask why?" So I told her, the chair, the whoops, the ripple down the table. I heard her breathing change. She had stood in enough wedding kitchens with me to know exactly what it cost a woman like me to drive 9 hours toward people who'd already decided to forget her. "Send me the cancellation," she said. "On letterhead. I'll honor it. The contract's clean. You're the principal of record. Nobody updated it." And then, softer, "Because she is a good woman and I trained her well. I'm sorry, Mrs. Marsh. I should have caught it when they booked. I should have called you. You couldn't have known," I told her. And I meant it. The only people who knew were the ones who'd planned it. I wrote the letter by hand first, the way I do everything that matters. Then I went down to the front desk in my robe and asked the night clerk if I could use their business center to print and send a few things. She was maybe 25 and clearly debating whether I was confused or dangerous. I was neither. I printed 3 cancellations, signed each one, and emailed them to the caterer, the florist, and the trio's manager with the booking number and my authorization line, and not one word of feeling in any of them, because in my line of work I learned a long time ago that the fewer words you use to take control of a room, the more control you actually have. Then I went back upstairs, lay down on top of the covers in the dark, and listened to the city, and slept better than I had in 2 years. I did not call my son. He had let me cross 400 miles to a table with no seat. He could find out the way the rest of them would, slowly in the candlelight, with 200 guests watching. Saturday night, I did not hide. I will admit I am not above wanting to see a thing I built come down. I booked the small rooftop bar across the lane from the Carriage House Inn, ordered a glass of decent Riesling, and sat where I could watch that beautiful courtyard fill up with people in linen and pearls. It started the way these things always start, with a hesitation that only a professional would catch. By 7:45, 200 glasses sat empty, and not one bottle had been poured, because the sommelier, who was supposed to be the caterer's man, had simply never come. A nervous boy in a borrowed vest kept appearing and disappearing through the service door like a cuckoo in a broken clock. The string trio that was meant to play through cocktails finished one piece and then, instead of starting another, packed up. I watched a young woman fold a violin into its case in the middle of a courtyard full of confused millionaires and walk out the side gate without a word. I watched my daughter-in-law's face do something I'd never seen it do. It tightened. She rose halfway out of her chair and looked around for someone to fix it, the way she'd always looked around for me. Except this time the someone she was looking for was sitting on a rooftop 60 feet away with a glass of Riesling, watching. A woman in gold sequins at the head table, one of the daughter-in-law's lifestyle influencer friends, the kind who treats every event like content, stood up with theatrical patience and said, loud enough to carry, "Is this part of the experience? Because if it's a bit, it's not landing." And she sat back down with a sigh you could have heard from the street. That was when my daughter-in-law's father got up and went looking for the kitchen himself. He came back trailing the inn's manager, a tidy man who straightened his tie, gave a small bow to the table, and explained in clear, careful English, for the benefit of 200 people now openly listening, that the inn deeply regretted the disruption, but that the catering, florals, and music for the evening had all been formally canceled that morning by the responsible party of record on the contract. My daughter-in-law's voice cut across the courtyard. "Condoled by who?" And the manager opened his little leather folder and looked down and read out my name. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, slowly, every face at that family table turned toward my son. I couldn't hear what he said. I didn't need to. I watched him put his elbows on the table and press his fingers together under his chin, the way Edmund used to when he was about to tell the truth and didn't want to. I watched him speak, low to the people staring at him. I watched the realization go through his shoulders like a current. He knew. After all those years of pretending I was furniture, he finally understood that the furniture had a name on the lease, and that the name had been there the whole time, and that he was the one who'd left it there, because it had never once occurred to him that I might use it. He looked across the lane and up, and for just a second I think he found me on that rooftop. I didn't wave. I lifted my glass an inch off the table, the smallest toast in the history of toasts, and I drank. 2 weeks later, back home in the mountains, I found a card in my mailbox tucked between the power bill and a grocery flyer. I recognized the handwriting, my daughter-in-law's, all those careful loops, the penmanship of a woman who wants very badly to seem warm. Inside was a birthday card, gold foil, blank-faced. A single line above the printed greeting. "So glad you could be part of it." And taped to the inside a $10 gift card to a gas station chain. $10. After 9 hours each way, after 40,000 and a down payment and a gallery opening. $10 of gas in a sentence so hollow you could hear the wind move through it. I laughed. I sat down at my own kitchen table, in my own house, and I laughed until my eyes watered. And then I got up and pulled out the folder I'd been working on every night for 2 weeks, the one I'd labeled in my own hand, and I got back to the real work. Because here's what I had been doing while they were posting their apologies and losing their sponsors. I had moved the rest of it, all of it, every dollar Edmund left me that they had been circling like it was already theirs, the part they had never thanked me for and the part they'd never gotten their hands on. I drove down to the office in town, and I sat with a woman I trust, and we set up a fund. A real one, with a board and bylaws and a tax ID. I named it after Edmund, because he was the one who believed a woman could build something out of a borrowed church kitchen and a station wagon, and he was right. The fund does one thing. It pays for women over 50 to start over, scholarships for the culinary school downtown, stipends for the ones who come in scared and quiet and good with their hands, the ones who got left, divorced at 60, widowed at 58, laid off at 55, and told they were too old to learn anything new. The ones who remind me of my old interns, who called me Mrs. Marsh with respect in their voices instead of a smirk. Internships, small grants for women starting food trucks and shops and cottage kitchens. 5 board seats. I chair it, and I'll chair it until they carry me out. My son's name is not on it, not as a trustee, not as a successor, not as a beneficiary. He never asked about the money. He assumed it would come to him the way the spring comes, automatically whether you've been good or not, as if inheritance were a season instead of a relationship. Let him learn it the way I learned where my seat was. From a stranger reading off a list. It got worse for them before it got better, and I won't pretend I minded. One of the gala guests, the sequined one, the content one, had posted a little video that night. Empty glasses, no cake, the trio walking out, captioned something about the most spectacular birthday collapse she'd ever witnessed. It went the way those things go. 40,000 strangers, then more. People who knew the low-country catering world recognized the name on the cancellation and put it together. Some called it karma. Some called it the meanest thing they'd ever heard. And you know, both camps were right, and I read every comment, and I made my peace with all of it. My daughter-in-law's lifestyle brand, that curated little shrine to effortless living, lost 3 of its sponsors inside a month. She posted something vague about growth and boundaries, and then she went quiet, which I imagine was the hardest thing she's ever had to do. And then, on a gray Tuesday with the rain coming sideways off the ridge, there was a knock at my door, and it was my son. He looked older. Not tired, ashamed. He stood on my porch with no umbrella, his hair stuck to his forehead, his jacket too thin for mountain weather. The way he never could dress himself for a season he wasn't standing in yet. "Mom," he said, "can I come in?" I didn't say anything. I stepped aside and let him drip onto the floor of the house he grew up in. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd quizzed him on his spelling words, and watched him sign his first apartment lease and listened to him pitch me a restaurant that was going to change everything. I put a mug of coffee in front of him, and he stared at the steam coming off it, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch it. "I know what you did," he said finally. "The fund, the dinner, all of it. I know. I waited. Why would you do that to us?" And I will tell you, of all the things he could have said, that was the one that settled it for me. Not "I'm sorry I let you fly 9 hours to a table with no chair." Not "I should have stopped her." It's not "I should have stood up." To us, as if I were the storm and he were the porch. I didn't raise my voice. I have never once raised my voice, and I wasn't going to start in my own kitchen. I picked up my planner instead, the real paper one, worn soft at the corners, the one I've kept my whole life. And I opened it to that week, and I turned it around so he could read it, and I put my finger at the bottom of the page, on the line marked family. It was empty. Nothing written there at all. Just a blank line where a name used to live. He looked at it for a long moment, His mouth opened like he might find something to say, and before he could, I turned the page. The next week was full. 5 columns, every line written in. Final scholarship interviews Thursday. Grant checks signed Friday. Opening dinner for the first cohort Saturday at 6 o'clock. 2 food truck launches I was consulting on for free. A whole life, color-coded and accounted for. Every hour of it spoken for by people who had never once asked Micey for a checkbook. There was no line left for him. Not because I'd crossed him out in anger, because I'd simply, finally, run out of room. He sat with that. Then he got up, and he left coffee untouched, and he drove back down the mountain into the rain, and I let him. The Saturday dinner was nothing like a gala. It was a long table in the community room behind the culinary school, mismatched chairs, paper napkins folded by hand, the smell of caramelized onions and rosemary chicken, and somebody's grandmother's cornbread coming out of an oven that's older than half the women in the room. The first cohort had cooked the whole thing, and they'd made me promise on my life not to lift a finger, which was the hardest promise I've kept in years. When I walked in, I stopped in the doorway. At the head of the table, they'd set a chair, a real one, an old carved thing somebody had found at an estate sale and sanded down, and across the back of it, pinned to a strip of linen, somebody had stitched my name. My place card, hand-lettered, said only, "For her." Above my plate sat a bowl of shrimp and grits done the way I taught them, with the andouille bloomed in the fat first. And I am not ashamed to tell you I had to hold on to the door frame. One of them stood up, a young woman, well, young to me. She's 53, a school bus driver for 20 years until the route got cut, came to us not knowing how to hold a knife and now braising lamb like she was born to it. She raised her sweet tea because half the table doesn't drink, and she said, to the woman who fed more than mouths, who fed second chances. And the whole table lifted their glasses, water and tea, and the one bottle of cheap Prosecco we split 11 ways. And not a single one of them asked whose son I was, or whose widow, or what my money used to be. They only knew I had said yes to them when the rest of the world had said they were finished. I raised my glass back. They forgot to set me a seat, I told them, and my voice didn't shake, which surprised me. So I decided to build the whole table. We ate until the candles guttered. Nobody took a single photograph. Later, after the dishes were done and the last of them had hugged me twice at the door and driven off into the dark, I stood alone for a minute at the head of that scarred pine table. In the quiet, the kind of quiet that used to frighten me, the kind I used to fill with other people's celebrations so I'd never have to sit alone inside my own. It didn't frighten me anymore. It felt like something I'd earned, finally, at 68, after a whole life of holding the chairs for everybody else. They taught me a thing, those people who had nothing and showed up anyway. A seat isn't something you wait to be offered. At a certain point in a woman's life, it's something she pulls up to the table herself, and the moment she does, she finds out it was always hers to take.